Opening up this discussion is Marta Subirà, who has also spoken at Fixing the Future before. She's the former Secretary of Environment and Sustainability of the Government of Catalunya, and she's now the President of Ferrocarrils de la Generalitat de Catalunya. So please put your hands together for Marta Subirà.
Thank you very much, Ed. Bon dia a tothom, moltes gràcies.
Good morning and thank you.
Ferrocarrils de la Generalitat de Catalunya means the Catalan Railway
Ferrocarrils
Company.
de la Generalitat
La majoria de vosaltres
is the Catalan Railway Company.
Ja ho coneixeu,
All local people
una
know
empresa
as we
de més de
are a
2.000
company with more than 2,000 staff members that provides its service with 2 lines in Barcelona and Catalunya. But we also have another specificity which is quite unique, which is that we also offer tourism services. So we have some touristic trains. We have, for example, stations in Núria, Boitaull, other ski resorts, and also in the park of Montsec, in Montserrat, in Núria mountain. So we are a company that offers services beyond typical railway services. Okay, having said that, I would like to first thank the Fixing the Future Festival for having me again. Here, I had the honor back in 2019, if I'm not mistaken, to open this festival back then, and it was really a success with excellent speakers, so it's really a pleasure for me to be here again with you to share the big challenges that we are facing in our planet. As Ed has said, in the past I had a responsibility in the environmental field, and in that responsibility I used to work with Vicente Guallart, the following speaker, and now I'm focused on mobility, which in a way is also connected to environment, sustainable mobility, high-capacity transportation, railway transportation. So we work to improve the clean air in our cities, but also the use we do of space. And I'm sure that Vicente will also talk about that. With no doubt, the organization of mobility is one of the big challenges that we face as a planet, because mobility is an essential element in our lives. And at the same time, it's a big resource consumer of all types, and it impacts on how we live and how we relate with each other. Some years ago, well, we know that the model, the lifestyle that we have is not sustainable. I was about to say in the long term, but it is not sustainable in the midterm. And in cities, we know that this model needs to change. And it's also in cities that the management of such limited resources, this discussion has started about the implementation of new policies. And this has been quite controversial because some tensions have arisen between the different stakeholders, the citizens, the different partners and agents, because we are all sharing this very limited resource that is space. In a way, and we've seen this in many dimensions, the pandemic has made us more aware of the need of rethinking everything, also our cities. And because of that, some of the policies that were not consolidated all of a sudden have been accelerated, and some decisions have been accelerated and some actions have been accelerated. But I would say that the challenge of sustainable mobility goes beyond the urban mobility in a strict sense, mobility in cities. Sometimes when we think about how we have built our vital spaces, we are not aware of the role of mobility throughout history, because mobility has helped us and still helps us organize our life in the city, our use of territory, our social and economic activities. So all these activities actually depend on our way of moving goods, services and people. And in a way also, this territorial arrangement has always depended on the available technology. And over many years, this technology has been based on vehicles, on cars, private cars, but before that we had railway. Railways allowed in the past to create mass production sites far away from the places where people lived. And so the railways allowed us to separate these two things, the place of producing and the place of living, and this had an impact on the territory. For example, the implementation of the first tube in London in 1863 allowed people to live in a different place from work. And it had an impact on residential areas in the city, and it transformed the city. And so this trend, initiated by the railways back then in the 20th century, was accelerated with the use of the massive use of cars. And so the urban planning was almost depending on the use of cars. And I'm sure that you have in mind some examples, but today we do not think that this is sustainable design. So what we want to have is just the opposite of that. And what we want to go towards is the Mediterranean style of cities, where we can go to places, buy food, where we can have these close and more human communities. Now, I believe we have a new opportunity. We believe that now it is possible to go a step forward towards this direction. We need to stop to organize ourselves based on the available technologies, but technologies should be there at our service. In the urban dimensions, as Vicente knows very well, we have progressed a lot with policies, tools and resources actually, and I believe that we are in an irreversible process, and so our cities will hugely be transformed. We will see less private cars, we will see more space for people, more green spaces, we will recover the spaces we used to have in the past. And of course we'll have huge environmental benefits. In the sessions of the last in-person Fixing the Future, the concept of biodiversity was really crucial, because these environmental services that nature provides us with, and also urban nature provides us with, need to be taken into account, because this is essential for life to happen in Earth and also in cities. But, we always speak about cities, but the transformation of cities is not enough. We need to be able to guarantee this accessibility and this connectivity to the whole territory. We need to organize all the activities that take place in all the territory in a sustainable way. So, one first focus needs to be placed on the urban area, a second focus on the suburban dimension. And here, public transportation plays an essential role, because the high-capacity urban or public transportation will allow us to give a competitive and an efficient service to all our citizens. I'm sure that most of you have heard about the fact that the future mobility has to be shared, connected, electrical and autonomous. Well, in public transportation, these four elements are already a reality. All over the world, urban railways and automated lines are being implemented. But this is not enough. These four attributes are not enough. We need to add a fifth attribute, which is critical. when we move away from cities, because the mobility needs to be shared, connected, electrical, and autonomous. But the mobility of the future needs also to be door-to-door. And for that, we need to complement the big transportation networks with services that we call proximity services. They need also to be attractive and competitive, so that people is willing to stop using their car because they have this transportation offer that allows them to go from door to door in a competitive way. Technology today, as before, is our ally. And we are seeing new options appear, and we need to be able to use them. So I said that we need to focus on cities. That's very important. We also need to focus on urban and metropolitan areas, but we need to look beyond that and go beyond that. We need to go beyond these metropolitan areas. Today, connectivity, physical connectivity and digital connectivity, both types of connectivity, have become a right at the same level of other services such as health, education, etc. So we need to guarantee this connectivity as a right and also as an element which is a must for our competitiveness. And so this should help us fight against inequality and the lack of territorial balance. Everybody needs to have the choice of living in a place or another with the same benefits. So we need to improve the benefits of current systems. We need to make sure that new solutions are boosted. Some solutions such as, for example, on-demand mobility or mobility applications that work with real-time data. And so, just to finish, I would like to invite you to be ambitious. We should not forget that most of the decisions that we make today will have an impact on future generations. We always talk about this impact on future generations, but it's true, most of the decisions that we make today actually will have an impact on these next generations, of course. 1 week ago, we celebrated the International Day of Clean Air. And so it's very important. And it was recalled to us that air is a resource that we share, and we need to take care of it, all the citizens of the planet. So this vision of a shared resource that we need to preserve needs to go beyond this and be extended to other dimensions. Of course, air, but also water, energy, and space, and the territory, which are also shared resources that we need to preserve. And in cities, as I said in my presentation, this is a resource that we share and which is scarce. So we need to find mechanisms so that its use is sustainable, efficient, and efficacious. Of course, we need for that public transportation and technology, so public and private sectors. We need to be active. We need to push all together to accelerate this transition, to put technology at the service of our common objectives, which are sustainability and preservation of the planet. And I'm sure that all together we will manage to do so. Thank you.
Where?
Okay, so thank you, Marta. I will invite Marta just to take her seat on the stage here while I invite up our second speaker. So we've had an indication there of the role of the railways and the connectivity of the city, of how keeping people together but also keeping them moving. Now I'd like to invite Vicente Guallart to take the stage. He's the author and former chief architect of Barcelona City Council and a director of his own architecture firm. But crucially, he's also just won very recently the Zhong'an Architecture Design Contest by planning China's first post-pandemic self-sufficient city. So please put your hands together and welcome to the stage Vicente.
Thank you, Ed. No, I should speak in Catalan. El 1904 va haver-hi
In
una reunió
1904, there
internacional
was
a
an
Nova
international
York
meeting in
per
New York
debatre el gran
to
problema de
discuss
mobilitat que
about
havia en
the
aquell
huge
moment,
mobility problem that they
que no
were facing
era
back
un
then,
altre que la merda.
because they have all
La merda
this
dels cavalls que deixaven
sheep, literally, he
al
said,
carrer perquè havia una
that was on
sobrepoblació
the
de cavalls
streets because of
que
horses. There
permetia la
was an
mobilitat
overpopulation
a
of
les
horses
ciutats.
who were
Llavors,
used for
aquesta
mobility in the
reunió
cities.
internacional, de
So
fet,
this
es
international
va
meeting
terminar abruptament perquè van decidir
finished
que no
suddenly
tenien
because they
solució, que
decided
no
that there
sabien
was
com
no solution.
podien
They did not know
resoldre
how to
el problema
solve
dels
that
excrements dels cavalls en els
problem
carrers. Sorprenentment,
of
sense que ningú demanés, la solució ja s'estava cuinant,
horse
perquè la
droppings on the
solució
streets. But
va ser
the solution was on its way
inventada a
because
través
it was invented thanks
Ford, la
to
producció
Ford, Mr.
dels
Ford, with the
vehicles
production of
de l'automòbil en sèrie i a partir
this serial
del
production
motor
of
de
cars,
combustió
and then with
van
the
començar a
combustion
construir-se, a
engine,
expandir-se
they
els
started
cotxes, els
to
autobusos,
manufacture
etc.
cars,
Per tant,
buses, etc.
el problema de la
So the
contaminació
problem
es va
of pollution
resoldre
was
amb
solved
una situació
with
d'una invenció tecnològica
this
disruptiva.
disruptive
En aquell moment,
technological
les ciutats,
invention. Back then,
el primer model de ciutat que veiem aquí a
these
Barcelona, una
first
ciutat compacta i
cities
densa,
were based on
creixia amb aquest tipus de
compact
malles,
design,
però
and cities used to
uns
be
anys més
expanded
tard, a
with this
Madrid,
design.
per exemple,
But
desenvolupaven
later,
una
for
altra
example, in Madrid,
idea, la idea de la
they
ciutat lineal,
developed the idea
que
of linear cities.
aparentment no va tenir èxit
It
fins
did not
que ens
succeed
van
until
anunciar The Line, que sembla una
the
pel·lícula,
line
una sèrie
was
de
announced.
Netflix, no?
One would say
En
that this
algun
is a
país,
Netflix
a Aràbia,
series
però
now,
seria una
but
altra
well,
conversa.
this
En
linear
qualsevol
city
cas,
appeared, but well, this is
també
another
el que va
discussion. Well,
passar
in any case, what
simplement 10
also
anys
happened
més tard
some
és
years
que es va
later
fundar
is
després
that
de la Primera Guerra
after the
Mundial, la
First
Bauhaus,
World
va ser un
War,
moment
the
en quan
Bauhaus was
es van
created.
juntar els arquitectes,
So
dissenyadors,
architects,
urbanistes més importants
urbanists,
d'Europa
and designers
i van
got together,
definir amb
and
optimisme
they
i amb bones
defined with
intencions
optimism
un nou
and with
model de
goodwill,
ciutat,
they defined a new
una
model
ciutat
for
basada
cities,
en la
cities
mobilitat en
based
el
on
vehicle privat,
mobility
en
based
els
on
edificis
private
fets
cars,
principals amb formigó
on
i amb la segregació d'usos.
concrete
S'ha de dir
buildings and with
que
the
en
segregation of
realitat,
uses.
encara que ara sembla
Well,
un pla malèvol
even if now
per
this
destruir
would
el món,
seem like
perquè part
a
de la destrucció del món està
bad
basada
plan
en
to
l'ús del
destroy the world,
formigó,
because
en l'ús del
part
vehicle
of
privat
the
i en la segregació
destruction of the
funcional,
world is
ho van
based on
fer
these
amb bona
elements,
fe.
concrete,
És a dir,
the private car, etc.
van
Well, they did
intentar,
that
de vegades,
with a good
la
intention,
invenció del futur
but
té conseqüències
well, sometimes
inesperades i en aquest cas,
what you invent
veritablement,
has
aquesta
unexpected
idea
consequences,
malauradament ha
and
triomfat, no?
unfortunately,
Ha triomfat a
this
tot el món, ha
idea
triomfat a
succeeded
Xina,
all around the world,
ha
in
triomfat
China,
aquí, també
here
en
also
Europa,
in
després del
Europe.
model de la ciutat compacta.
After the
Molt de la
compact
nostra
model
perifèria es va
of
construir
cities,
així,
most
no?
of our
I
cities were
també,
built like
especialment als
that.
Estats Units,
And also in the
va
USA,
triomfar la idea, els dibuixos que es feien en els anys 20 del
this
segle passat
idea
a partir
succeeded
de la
in
primacia
the
de l'automòbil.
20s. Well, this it is based on the use of private cars.
Era la
Well,
segona revolució industrial.
this was
Quan
the
va arribar
second
la
industrial
tercera revolució
revolution, but when the
industrial,
third
aquesta és una imatge de
industrial
l'any
revolution came,
95,
this is a picture
quan,
from
de fet, un any abans
1995, 1 year
s'inaugurés el CCCB, on
before
estem avui,
this center
recordo
CCCB was opened.
un
I remember
un escriptor, Jérôme Lanière,
writer
que deia
Jérôme Lanière
que en el futur
said,
el
in the
vehicle
future,
privat, l'automòbil
private
seria com els
vehicle
cavalls de fa
will
un
be
segle,
like horses
perquè
1 century
el que deia
ago,
era que la
because what he
realitat
said is that
virtual
virtual
canviaria les
reality
regles
would
del joc de tal manera
change
que el
the
desplaçament
rules of
físic
play
no
so
seria
that
necessari.
a physical
La veritat és
movement
que
would
això
not be
encara no ha
necessary
arribat.
anymore.
Ara
Well,
sembla
actually,
que
we are not
s'anuncia
there yet.
la tercera
It
onada
seems like
del
now they are
potencial
talking about the third
virtual
wave
realitat amb el
of
metavers,
the
però el que és
potential
cert és
virtual
que
reality
aquesta
with
és una
metaverse,
visió que
but
també ens
this
ve
is a
d'alguna manera
vision
del passat.
that comes from the
Avui en
past,
dia,
actually.
la gran
Well, today,
contaminació, l'equivalent
this
a aquests
huge
residus dels
pollution,
cavalls,
so the equivalent of these horse excrements that they had in York in the
bàsicament és la
past, is
contaminació
actually this
atmosfèrica i
air
també
pollution.
veiem que
This is the
possiblement hi
equivalent.
haurà nous
And we
mecanismes, com
are
deia
saying
Marta,
that
que és la
maybe there will be
mobilitat
new
elèctrica, la
mechanisms such as
mobilitat
electrical
compartida,
mobility, shared
automatitzada.
mobility,
Hi ha la
automated
promesa
mobility,
del
as Marta said.
vehicle
We have this
sense
promise
conductor,
about
com
the
veieu aquí, sense volant,
driverless
perquè en realitat
vehicle with
també pensava durant
this
un temps
design,
que la idea de que tothom tingui
because
un
actually
vehicle
for
que
some
vagi pel
time
carrer és una idea una mica estranya, no?
Well, we think now that having all of us an individual vehicle is quite a bizarre idea. If we think about the first electrified mobility, which are elevators, well, at the beginning of the century, elevators also had a driver, because there was that gentleman that was pushing the button in the elevator, and there were seats also in elevators because they were seen as a shared mobility, actually, and there was a driver. So the future of vehicles without drivers makes sense in this idea around automation. And you see this type of designs. Well, 2 years ago, in 2020, this challenge was defined, this zero-emission Europe by 2050. I believe this is a huge challenge that will have an impact on mobility, a clear impact. Another issue that I'm really interested in is to prove things by comparison, as they do in mathematics. So I like the idea of seeing how things are happening in other places of the world to understand our future, or what our future will be like. So in Europe we say that we don't need to grow more, but what's happening actually is that in the world there is an urbanization process which is huge, especially in Africa. In the next 30 years, more than 1 billion people will move to cities because their population is growing. This means building a city like Madrid every month for the following 30 years in Africa. So this makes us think that this Eurocentrist idea actually is quite an old idea, because what we should be doing is to help those places that can have a direct impact in the migration movements, and we should try and share our knowledge. This is a picture, even if we may think that Barcelona is so important and so influential in the world. Well, when new cities are built in the world, they are not built like Barcelona, okay? Mainly because they are funded. Well, this is a picture of the new capital city, the new Cairo capital city, which is funded by Chinese people. So the type of cities they are building are still cities where private cars are absolutely essential. So I'm now running a project in Africa, and I see that in Africa there are still places with huge quantities of nature, and when they build cities, they do them following these natural structures, and oftentimes they do them in an informal way, and it looks like there are infinite slums. And the urban model that they are developing is this linear city model, as Arturo Soria proposed, because what they do is basically a very big street, and the rest of the city is without asphalt, it's not paved. So this has an impact on things such as public transportation. So they build these huge streets, which are really the bone of the whole territory. And as Marta said, the idea of pollution is very important. In Africa, it's really surprising to see that in such a natural environment, cities smell like oil. And you know why? Because 95% of the vehicles they use are second-hand vehicles. These are vehicles that we have abandoned and rejected. So the residues of our mobility end up structurally polluting emerging countries, such as African countries. Another thing that I did not understand was to see why so many people used motorbikes. Why was that? And, well, I saw all these powerful motorcycles, and then one day I understood that it was not like that. I was told that this is mobility. Actually, this girl paid that boy to bring her home. So we were talking about door-to-door transportation. Well, this is happening already in Africa, because since roads are not paved, they have this type of mobility, door-to-door mobility, and shared mobility, actually. So you have these boys with motorcycles that offer their services, and they can drive you home. And I thought, well, that's very smart. This is really a good adaptation in that reality. Or, for example, cabs. You see many cabs, they don't have Uber there, but what they have is a real-time negotiation Uber. I mean, this car, you see 4 people inside the car, the taxi, the cab, but they don't know each other. So the taxi driver stops, they negotiate the price, and then you go up or not. Sometimes you are in the taxi, and then a woman comes with 2 children, and the one child sits on your lap. I mean, but what really impresses me in all of that is that mobility can exist without all these complexities that we have built here around applications, Uber, etc. Mobility can exist without all that. So part of our challenge is, yes, to rethink how to organize cities. Of course, we mentioned this 2 years ago already, but now we need to see what new systems of transformation we can, of transportation, we can implement in our cities. Well, to finish, I'm sharing this image of the bus network in Barcelona, and we call it spaghetti system. It's impossible to understand a thing. I mean, it's impossible for you to understand how to get from A to B. It's impossible for you to understand such a bus network with 113 lines. When I was head architect, I did a test. I just took a bus in one place to see where I would go, and I was actually in the wrong direction, of course. And then someone said, we need to invent a new system. So instead of updating the existing system, sometimes you need to start from scratch. So we have this idea to change everything with this system with vertical and horizontal lines. And also, this has a very important impact because we could create this super blocks system where mobility, I mean, it's based on streets, and so thanks to these super blocks we could reduce the traffic. So this idea was quite promising because the impact would be important. Well, someone said that this was a good idea but not good enough, and so they created a new system, yet another one, where they modify the lines. The network seems to be orthogonal, but now there were less stops. So people said, well, buses go quicker. Yes, because there were no stops almost. And that was not good for elder people. And so there was this criticism that I want to share with you. No one did a simulation. They did not test the use of all of this because what they wanted was to have this quick bus network. And actually, this was a spaghetti degraded network. So they were trying layer on top of layers, and at the end of the day, the result was not good. Well, finally, they changed all of that. They implemented this new bus network, but citizens said that they wanted to keep some of the spaghetti lines. So the bus map in Barcelona is impossible to be drawn today because we have 23 orthogonal lines, more 50 spaghetti lines, and because neighbors said that they do not want to lose those spaghetti lines because they were really useful for them to go to the university or to the health center, etc. In any case, Barcelona City Council has decided that they wanted to develop this idea of super blocks. The bad news is that now the name is the same, but the content is another one. So now instead of having super blocks, what they are creating are these green areas, which is a good idea also, but as you see here on the right hand, these green streets are 1 street out of 3 streets. I mean, basically, they have kept the name, but they have changed the concept. And also, the way in which they will be implemented, because this is not streets at the city center. So in Paris, the fact of transformation streets into pedestrian street, the idea of eliminating the use of private cars, well, that's huge, actually. So this is a huge challenge. And this is a surprise because previous mayors have criticized the current mayor because she is trying to pedestrianize streets and to remove the use of cars. So we see that once streets are for pedestrians, they never go back to their previous use. So investments in mobility are really huge and important. So in the world of the future, we would need to build non-polluted cities, cities which enable our mobility, and cities which are more human and kinder. And it has to be compatible with the regional mobility, which makes sense. And here, the complaints come from people from outside Barcelona, because sometimes they don't have any good solution. Today, information is crucial, and sometimes Google has more information about mobility in Barcelona than the city council. And because we have these big companies that invest in technology. What I would say, just to finish, is that decisions need to be made based on data. So, based on data, we will be able to make smart decisions for the future. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. So two lively and provocative presentations there. So I've just got a couple of questions before we move on to our other two speakers in the session. Obviously, we can't talk about mobility without talking about the pandemic, and obviously the disruption that brought when we all had to stay at home and no one traveled. What would you say are the kind of lasting impacts, if any, of the kind of the lockdowns and the shutdowns, which perhaps reset some of our behaviors? And have there been any lasting changes, or are we just going back to normal? Let's start with you, Marta.
Well, I think that we all agree that public transport during the pandemic consolidated its position as an essential service to keep our lives alive and going and our cities alive. What we are experiencing, though, is that the shift that we thought that maybe could happen, it's not as intense as some anticipated, and ridership is recovering steadily. Traffic jams are again around us. Crowded transit systems are again a reality. Of course, there is an underlying tendency, and there will be a change, but it's difficult to consolidate such structural changes because it's much more than mobility. We need substantial change in the workplace, in our companies. Not all the jobs can be done remotely, and the change must be structural, and that is something that I think will be slower than we maybe predicted at the first time after the pandemic.
Thank you.
Well, I'm working in China. In fact, I was impacted with the pandemics before in China than not here. And then I remember my friends, in China, they are still very strict about the pandemic. And basically what happened is the opposite that Marta said, because basically the traffic mobility, the private mobility has been increased because the people don't want to be exposed to be contaminated. So I would say that at least at the beginning, there was an increase of, well, first, people proved that could live without moving too much. And the other good thing is what proved that it worked is internet. Basically because internet didn't collapse, although we discovered that there is Zoom, there was tele-education, whatever, no? So now we trust people when we make agreements through Zoom. That before that was kind of impossible. So I would say that this culture of the telepresence and the video communication, I think that this is something that will remain forever. I would say that there is another phenomenon, that these people that decide to go to live outside the city during many years years they say, no, cities is the place, where is the culture, where is the interaction, where everything, good. But sometimes we don't live so well. So if we can have an urban life without living in cities, this will be great. And this is something, that's why I show the map of Catalonia, because I will say that if you live 1 hour drive from Barcelona or whatever, because it's 1 hour and a half train, yeah? In Catalonia, we have still 1 hour and a half train. Or more to some places, while you have 1 hour drive. So,
Not with Ferrocarrils.
But not with...
Oy.
But, yeah. It's working?
No, it's true. Well, you say this, sometimes it's more than 1 hour and a half, depending on the cities, maybe Manresa, Igualada. So sometimes what you have to provide is good service, onboard services. So you need to change the mind shift in the sense of, okay, maybe you will it will take longer for you to make that trip, but it will be more comfortable. You could work, you could watch TV, a movie, you could do something else, not being in the car, stuck in a traffic jam. So apart from what Vicente said, that I agree completely, and of course the flexibility of the rush hours, for example, to flatten the demand and providing more flexibility into the times that people go into the city. We need to make people understand that going by train, if you have good onboard services, can be also a very good option instead of your private car, even if you live outside the city, in 1 hour or 2 hours from the city.
Well, especially in that context of digital connection.
Yeah.
I mean, and I speak as someone who was 25 years a Londoner, and I moved out to the country, and, I don't need to commute, but I do need to go to London maybe once a week. And so I find I've got the sort of best of both worlds. But, I mean, the question I wanted to ask then, I mean, you talked about Anne Hidalgo in Paris and the 15-minute city and, this reclamation of space. Because, I mean, I said this when I was an environment manager at London Transport in 1998. I said, even if we go to electric vehicles, we're still going to be stuck in clean, quiet traffic jams. So, and you mentioned, New Cairo and the sort of, the new cities being built, which are still car dependent. How do we take that space? How do we design the car out of the city? Or do we still need to save space for electric vehicles and driverless cars? Or do we have to be bolder and more ambitious about making those spaces available for walking and cycling and al fresco living?
In 30 years' time, private cars will be banned in cities. This is going to happen. This is what happened with horses. So there is some kind of evolution. And the idea that this is one thing, but the other, Jaime Lerner, that is the father of one of the sustainable urbanists, he said the best ride is the best, the one that you don't make it. Yeah. So that means that you need to organize the city in a way that you should not move to each other, to one place to another. This is an invention from that moment that I showed before. The idea of the Bauhaus, where you need to segregate the functions in the city in order to be better organized. Brasilia was an example of that. That city that we saw in Cairo is also connected with that. I remember that Barcelona was doing, for example, this. I would say that what in Paris they did was to brand this thing, because Barcelona had been working for many years in these 50-minute cities, and the first time I heard that was in Seoul many years ago. But in Paris, we're good on taking the credit for that, because the idea of having a plan of markets or a plan of libraries that are in every neighborhood is something that already happened here and in some other places. Also, London has these kind of districts or neighborhoods organization that make this idea possible. No, so I would say that what we should be doing, and this is something I have been very critical, is if now we are removing cars from the streets, we should know how the people will move. Because in order to make these green cities, we need to make huge investment in infrastructures in avoiding the necessity of these people moving from Manresa, from 50, 60 kilometers with their own car. We need to, and my question is, how much will cost to remove 50% of the mandatory mobility in the center of Barcelona? Because we don't know. I'm sure that you don't know. No one knows.
I know a little. I know a little.
Yeah, little. But the question is, the only way to know what you want to do is to have a budget and to have a plan on time. Because if not, we'll be criticizing there is a collapse, the train is working and whatever, but we are not doing the right investment. So I would like really to know how much will cost to remove 50% of the mandatory mobility in Barcelona. And we don't know.
I can give you a number, not exactly answering your question, or not totally, but to reduce 25% of the cars that get into Barcelona every day, you will need another Ferrocarrils de la Generalitat de Catalunya. So you will need to double the offer that we are now providing.
How much cost?
Well, no, the cost, I told you that I couldn't tell you exactly the number.
Know.
But
because then we are
because
talking
now
about 10 billion,
the budget would be like, at least you need to build infrastructure, of course, which is huge. You need to find the ways to get into the city. Although we already have a lot of drawings on how we can get into the city from the different areas of the metropolitan area. We are planning new lines of metro. We are planning new lines from the Collserola Park. But in order to have an amount, 25% less cars would mean the two lines that we already have, the Barcelona-Vallès and the Llobregat-Anoia, doubled.
Marta, you should call me 2 weeks and tell me the number.
I will.
Because,
I will.
Because we need to say this is the number, we need to put this, we put on time, and then we start to invest. Because if
not only the number, but the time that you need to build all that.
Yeah, but if
which
you
is
say
not
10 billion,
for tomorrow.
we can divide in 25 years or in 10 years, but we need to start somehow.
Yes.
Do you think these two have worked together before?
We're friends.
Yeah, exactly. So the final point I was going to make is it's an issue between what you're saying in terms of the long-term planning and the visioning, that all of these things always take a long time. And we have these transitions and we have to set those kind of goals. And we also have to understand that sometimes the transitions are painful. I mean, the solution is not to speed up the buses by stopping the buses stopping. I mean, I love that story because that's just classic. We make the buses run on time by not picking up people and dropping them off. Yeah. But, so what would you say is the sort of the message to people who are trying to implement these kind of things? Especially in that idea that, I'm not saying Carlos Moreno stole Barcelona's ideas,
no.
but he definitely branded them very well, as you said.
Yes, absolutely.
The 15-minute city captures the imagination.
It's good. I was checking who invented the cities in transition, and it was Robbins in UK. Yeah. And the transition idea was defined in 2006. So we are already 16 years in transition. And we are talking still about the transition. So there are people, experts in talking about the transition and not making anything. The other number is, if you think about the urban models, an urban model is defined every 50 years. 100 years ago was defined the Bauhaus, only 100 years ago, and this happened after the Spanish flu and also the First World War. So you need to have a catastrophe in order that the people realize that things really need to change. And then the next big move was in the 70s, after the May Revolution and the 68, and also the crisis of the oil. That was the moment when people decide to go back to the center. So coming back to the center, this building, the renovation of this area is coming from this vision. The urban tourist is something that start at that moment. So now we are in this 50 years moment where we need to define a new paradigm. And then my question is, if we thought that COVID was strong enough to change, what we see now is it was not. It was not. The people was doing incredible things, but few things are really remaining. No, people were criticizing, but the truth is nothing really deep changed. So I am worried. I was very optimistic 10 years ago. I wrote a book, The Self-Sufficient City, talking about how we should be producing, how we should produce energy, food and so on. And now it seems that we need them, because it seems that the energy will go up because there is something in Ukraine and so on. So what I mean is, I would like that humanity will be smart enough in order to make hard changes without a war or a big destruction. I'm not sure if this will happen, because we have already the flu, like 100 years ago, we are starting to have a war. So from my point of view, we should shorten the transitions, because now it's clear the impact that we have. I mean, London weather is becoming like Barcelona weather. No, maybe it's good for you. In Russia, they are starting to thinking to make a beach, because they don't have ice anymore. So
London at 40 degrees is not nice.
Not nice.
It's really not pleasant. We're not ready for it. Thank you. Final word, Marta.
Well, I agree with him. I've been working on environment for many, many years, and it was clear for me that people wouldn't change if the problem is not just in front of our faces. We cannot plan as a society. We knew for many, many years that climate change was coming, that it was a real threat, that bad things will happen, and still, if it doesn't affect our daily life, we don't react. And with the pandemic, we have seen that we've been affected, but we forget really quickly. We could have a glimpse of what life could be without cars, with clean air, hearing the birds singing every day in front of our houses. And how quickly we forget that, and we go again to our old habits. So I don't want to be pessimistic. I am an optimistic, but maybe it's still too early. Maybe we need to see to spend some more years, and maybe the new generation that has lived in a different way as we have done, they will be the ones that will make the change, and our generation, it's not ready to these such big changes that we need.
We need to get out of the way.
Be optimistic.
Okay, thank you very much to Vicente and Marta. Put our hands together. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's move directly on. Now I'd like to invite Federico Parolotto to come up to the stage. Federico is an architect and urban planner, and he's on a mission to make the world travel at a more sustainable pace. I think Gandhi famously said there is more to life than increasing its speed. So please put your hands together for Federico, who works for Milan City Council.
We get it right? Okay. Okay, a couple of corrections. Thanks a lot for the invitation, by the way. It's a fantastic event. I don't know if Kathy is around. I don't think she is, but I wanted to thank everybody for being invited here, and it's a great opportunity. Very quickly, I am actually the CEO of a firm called MIG Hub, and we are transport planners, and we work around transport and mobility in general. I'm stating the obvious here, but basically the reason why we work and we think transportation is very important. It was mentioned earlier on also in the previous panel that it has a massive impact on the emission, and there are people that are going to Mongolia by train. So the truth is that we really have to weigh or to look at possibilities to find another way of moving of this 25%, which is somehow constant throughout the world. About in Europe, is 67% is on road traffic. So the truth is that we have to revise that kind of volume. We have to change the way we move in cities. It's been discussed several times. A lot of things have been said that I totally agree with. So I start from an example of the reason why we got into this condition, why we have so much CO2, so many cars, and maybe a couple of recipes to go out of it. The first one is this project which was built in Milan recently. Well, not that recently. I just give you a sense of where we are. This is the long road takes you up to Milan. It's the motorway that takes you to Genova, which is the area where Milanese go on holiday over the weekend, people that can afford it, privileged kind of part of the society, like the one that can work from home remotely. Because they have to go to work. And the truth is that the road hits the city when he enters there. And I'm just pointing that circle there as the area of the element. Let's see if I can, that area there, which to me is very important because it's the area where, if you were there 20 years ago, you would have seen something fairly innovative in the sense that you would have seen a construction site happening and chainsaws bringing down the trees that were planted there 30 years before. And it was done in August for a very good reason, because there was nobody around. The population around the area was completely against it and fought a battle, but then that summer was the right time, and the municipality decided to go for that, because exactly it was the summer. And that's the end result. It's a monster in town. It's a massive infrastructure. It's 700 meters by 700 meters, 3 levels. And those are the nice pictures, the seductive pictures that were designed, that were taken after the construction. The sense of modernity, speed, the dynamism that we were been talking about. But the truth is that once those pictures were taken and the reality kicked in, if you walk through it, you have a completely different feeling. That's a completely different environment from those pictures. So that machine, in a way, generated a huge amount of traffic in that area, split completely a community apart, and became, a real monster. This is how pedestrians go around it, and that's the reason why you feel, if you look at the project itself, you can really see that whoever designed it had in mind only the process of cars and had not in mind how to connect people through that part of the city. And obviously, after it was open, a set of car crashes happened. Some of terrible, I won't go through it, but there was a terrible thing of an Egyptian family trying to cross the road and hit by a car, because it's so inconvenient. If you are a woman and maybe you are with a couple of kids, one is small in your hand, do you want to negotiate this entire excruciatingly painful detour? No. And this is not the young girl, let's pedestrianize in the city center, hand in hand. This is when the city begins to be something else, because I think what the question was earlier on is, where does the city begin and where does the city end? This is not a minor topic. And if you see here below, people were actually targets, and those were elderly and women. I even discovered it's an Italian, but because it's an Italian newspaper, but the truth is that even I discovered there was a women serial mobber below, because women are obviously, for a reason, weaker physically, so easier. So a space that is perceived as safe by the guy who designed the junction, it's probably a man in mid-age, and somebody that goes through it is completely different if the body that goes through it is way smaller, lighter, and less strong. So the truth is that this system, these devices, basically generates a wrong idea of a city that brings cars around, generates and keep on generating cars, and split in an unequal way the community. And these junctions are basically a monster, a relic of an idea of a city that, as we discussed it now, the planning for Barcelona is fantastic, is now disappearing. So what do we have to do with the monsters? Well, with the monster, we have only one solution. We have to demolish it. I mean, it's not, it's half joking, but it's not. Those were not there. They have to remove it. It was just a wrong idea of a city. And I just put this couple of examples because also Barcelona is on monsters. You should be thinking about, not just about, I'm super fan of Super Ilias, think the project is fantastic, Vicente, Salvador Rueda, I think it's, the best way of readdressing the city, but we have other things on the outskirts, and we think it's crossing Badalona. Why is this crossing Badalona? To get cars quickly into town where the riches are staying, so this should go as fast as the pedestrianization of the city center of Barcelona. And I think it could be done. There are different ways, because one thing which is very important is that mobility, money, tunnel, it's way more flexible than what we think. Don't believe in modeling and rigid systems. You can do it. This is a very quick example of RHC in Milan. There's one in London, of course, but in Milan it was different. The socio-cultural turmoil is very different, more kind of car-oriented, although things are changing fast there, and the city the city center has strong polarity towards the center. This is the area of RHC, holds mostly 40% of the jobs of the city, and it was built quickly. It works like the one in London. There are cameras up there. They take the number plate. They send you the the ticket at home, the fine if you go through it. If you pay the ticket, you can then go. And basically, I just wanted to give you an example of what when I say that things are much more malleable and things can be demolished the way they were built. That if you look at if you look at the gray area here, this is the traffic in 2011, and this is the traffic in 2012 after RHE was introduced. The traffic went down by 30% in one day. No new rails, no new junctions, no new roads. It just went down. Why? Because certain people stayed at home, others decided to take sustainable boats, others went on public transport, others didn't drive in that time. All of that to say that we really can play around with things and make sorry about that, and make the traveling time way easier. And change the city. So we can really change the city. We can really bring that flexibility about. And I have to go back to Paris also very fast, because I have a lot of doubts about the 15 minutes, because it sounds about privilege and, and city center of Paris and bourgeois. But what about people that are living outside? What about people that don't work from home? That's to be addressed. But I think one of the things that most important to me for the Paris project is the Rive Droit project. I don't know if you're not familiar with that, but it's one of the projects that Anne Hidalgo, which I think is an incredible mayor. We would like to have her in Milan. But the truth is that, this road here was basically a road that was built by Pompidou, and Pompidou said that Parisians love their cars. It was a road crossing the city. Basically, and the truth is that that road, which seemed to be incredibly important, the way to cross Paris, the most important road ever. The truth is that it was a great space. It became part of the Paris Plage program. So in the summer, when people would leave the city, would go there and have bathing, and it would be closed. There was no school open, not a lot of people at work. But then in 2017, Anne Hidalgo, the year of her election, said, "Okay, you know what? We close it." What do you mean you close it? And the engineer went there and said, you have to do 200% road traffic on the street. You're going to clog Paris. You're going to lose the election. You are over as a politician. The thing is that it was actually closed, and it's still closed. It won't open anymore. And guess what? Paris works. No more additional metros. Nothing. I mean, obviously Paris is undergoing lots of process, but the truth is that these things can happen without having the immediate counterpart of something similar, another infrastructure, another digging. Do we have to keep excavating? Do we have to keep doing metro stuff? I mean, we can have cities to work in a much more flexible way. And I think this space, to me, is so much better than any of the towers that are at the Défense, which is, by the way, also a fairly dreadful place. Finally, I just wanted to say that there is also room for many, a bit less maybe aggressive. It's another project we're working on in Milan. This is Piazzale Loreto, where they hanged Mussolini upside down at the end of the body. Unfortunately, at the end of here, to be precise, there used to be a petrol station. And it's basically, again, this used to be on the outskirts of the city, and then it kind of grew around it, and it was basically a junction designed with the arrival of the metro. And again, this was completely unfriendly. It is, because if you go there, it's still like that with some changes due to the pandemic. Impossible to cross, completely car-centric. And we designed, thanks to C40, this competition that we won with a large group of designers. We redesigned the flows. Obviously there was the architect, Metrogramma, and a very large group of people working around it. But the truth is that we rearranged the mobility, and those are the flows that we arranged. Then we created the space that was not there, and we rearranged the flows. And we used the model to discuss with the municipality how much are we willing to reduce the volume of traffic that is going to go through it. So that's the question now, how much risk you want to take. And of course, if you're somebody that is visionary, willing to take risk, you can push it further. If you are somebody that is still a bit more conservative, you have to go back. But the discussion on modeling now is how much can we reduce? How much can we evaporate traffic? And this is the project. I like the project because it's a project that we discuss it as all the open fronts is glazed. It becomes a place where you can walk in the night, where you feel secure, where you feel that you can be there regardless if you're an old, a woman, a boy, a man. I think it's important because now that we are getting out of our cars, the city has to respond with a political action, which is a political action that makes a better city. And I think this is actually possible. And I think there is not much time ahead of time. I mean, we've been discussing that for a long time, that we are running out of time. But I think now more than ever, bold action have to be taken, and they have to be taken now. Thanks.
Wow, thank you, Federico. Yeah, destroy the monsters. And I mean, just as an example from London as well about the courage of taking space, I remember the debates when they turned Trafalgar Square from the traffic island to join it to the National Gallery. And, you know, everyone grumbles for a bit and then they just get on with it. And you've got a much better, more coherent public space. So our final speaker in this session is Nachwa Ouertatani. She first learned to ride a bike with the Vélorution. Oops. Oh. Uh-oh, have I just broken the clicker? Let's fix it. Yeah. If you fix a clicker, and I'll introduce Nachwa. So the Vélorution was a revolutionary movement that's taking over Tunis on green wheels. As a cyclist of 25 years, this is a woman after my own heart. She's now a cycling instructor and activist, peddling her way to a low-carbon society and a healthier, more sustainable and more democratic mobility. So please put your hands together for Nachwa, and hopefully we'll have fixed the clicker. Perfect timing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Hi, everyone. Hope you're having a great day so far. Well, I'm Nachwa, and I'm very thrilled to be here with you today at Fixing the Future Festival. Well, let's get started. First, this is the back view. It's me there on the picture. I was wearing my favorite T-shirt. I was looking ahead at the future, I guess. Well, what is written on the back of my T-shirt means Tunisia is better by bike. But here today, by my presence, I'm going to show you that it's not only about my country, but as much as it's about the future ahead of us. I grew up in a family who strongly believed that the bike is a toy that is no longer needed by the time you turn 12, and then you have to throw it and to look for something else to play with. Well, the idea was very convincing, and I was very obsessed with it, that I kept looking for this so-called something else. Well, until the pandemic hit, with all its endless curfews, I realized how much I became very car dependent. Since I was stuck at home, looking at a bunch of cyclists who were freely enjoying their rides while I couldn't get out and exceed 5 kilometers circle around my home. Well, it was very challenging because I felt like chained. I couldn't get out of home. I wanted my freedom back. What I did first, I joined the Vélorution School of Bike. I took a few lessons to refresh my muscle memory because I didn't touch a bike for a while. I turned my grocery shopping into short trips. I discovered how beautiful cities are when crossed by bike, but it wasn't enough. I wanted more. Well, let me show you now how does the situation looks like in Tunisia. As you can see, we have a very crowded city center. We have an undeveloped public transportation system. We have no parking spots, no cycling lanes. We are colonized by cars, and we are invaded by a huge number of them. Let me show you more. Even the only land that we have is taken by cars. There is no respect for cyclists. They are marginalized, and they are not even included in the mobility system. We are not recognized as people who are using a means of transport. Well, facing all these findings, I couldn't stay passive. I wanted to uphold this affair. How can I make my city bike-friendly, how can I steer it to a sustainable mobility system? What I did next, I joined the Vélorution's team, I became its ambassador, and I integrated its advocacy actions. We started with Tunis by Bike, which is the critical mass. It's a social movement where we have to show them the real number of cyclists, and we have to stop the marginalization of the bike users by claiming our rights for a fairly divided road. Here, we are aiming for inverting the balance between cars and bikes. We are looking to have the first place. We are looking for security. We are looking for specific lanes. We are looking for specific infrastructure so that we can ride freely, we can ride in a comfortable way. We also made social actions to emphasize on the importance of the respect of the cycling guidelines in our country, because in Tunisia, when you are driving a car, you are more safe than you are driving a bike, and your life is always threatened by its presence. By these actions, we essentially targeted people, the citizens. We wanted to make a bigger community so that we can put a bigger pressure on decision makers, because in my country, leaders are looking for ways to import more cars and to find solutions for people to help them buy new ones. Massive ignorance is reigning. They are blinded about the fact that the cycling mobility is an enormous potential to develop a sustainable mobility system which can help decongest the city, make it greener and less polluted. We, as Vélorution, a Tunisian NGO who is working on the promotion of the cycling culture as an alternative means of transport, we want to steer the country toward a sustainable mobility system by contributing in setting up guidelines and measures regarding the land use planning, infrastructure and city design in favor of biking. Thus, we are making agreements with municipalities, the government, and implementing bike laws and infrastructure. We are very citizen dependent, so we are looking for ways to double and to triple our cyclist number. So we launched 3 school bikes. I was part of, I took lessons on this school bike. And then I became a cycling instructor. Well, we had a 69 years old participant who was very excited to invade the road after the end of the session, and then she did it, and she was very incredible. Our school bike is collaborative. The trainee becomes trainer and so on, and we are using our locally made cargo bike to transport the bikes so that we can reduce our CO2 emission. We take people who don't feel safe riding alone in groups of cyclotourism to make them feel more comfortable, to help them gain confidence, and to show them that the city is beautiful when it's crossed by bike. And then, to democratize the use of the bike and to make it accessible for everyone, we launched the Souk of Bisklet, which is a local market where they can find second-hand bikes with reasonable prices. The hope and the inspiration to the Arab and to the African region is Dar al-Bisklet, House of Bisklet, which is the first cultural center who is dedicated to the promotion of the cycling mobility in Tunisia. From it, we are spreading our vision to the urban mobility. We are concretizing our projects. We are organizing sessions for trainees. We are organizing also mechanical workshops to help people become more independent while riding their bikes. This is our Darf Bisklet. And then we, as we believe that the bike should take an important pillar, an important place in the economic pillar, we incubated project ideas related to the cycling mobility. The ideas that we had were about delivery on food, food by bike, organizing cyclotourism trips, renting service, because we don't have any of them. As we believe, oh sorry, there's one missing. Here, sorry. This one, yeah. As we believe that the bike should take an important, cycling is a very promising transport solution for cities, and we are trying to reinforce our efforts to make the difference, to lay out a path toward a sustainable city. Vélorution Tunisie is not a cycling club, it's a revolutionary movement and new hope for the African, the Arab region. Ladies and gentlemen, this is... Yes. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, this is the front of you. It's still me there on the picture, still looking ahead at the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Nachwa. So we're going to have a couple of moments for questions from the audience in a moment, but I will just start gathering your thoughts and we'll send the microphone around. I mean, I'll just ask one question to both of you, perhaps starting with you, Nachwa. The question of additionality always comes up for me. It's not enough to just do the good things. You've got to stop doing the bad things.
Yes.
And that addresses some of this battle for space and systems and safety and togetherness. I mean, what's your thought on, we've got to stop doing the bad things as well as doing the good things on top of the bad things?
Well, first, I think that we should choose the bike over the car. First, we should move to a sustainable lifestyle in which we can reduce our CO2 emission, consume less plastic, walk more, drive less, use public transport more. Well, it's a mixture of improvements on self-development and on the way how we look at the city, because it's the focal point where the people should feel safe. So if you look at your city and you don't feel safe, well, you should try to improve it.
Federico?
Yeah, I think that just we discussed, and also the previous panel, I think the space redistribution battle is the real battle and that also, but the moment you feel safe on a bike or walking, you immediately grow. I saw it after the post-pandemic space redistribution that happened in Milan and areas where, they finally made some simple bike lanes far away from a real infrastructure, but the response was amazing simply because you generate this kind of induced demand the other way around. But I think that's the key point, and I think it's so important that I think as we are running out of time, I think it's so important that leadership takes decisions towards a systemic change very rapidly. I think that's the key point. I think contribution like the one from Nachwa, which is super important, and the young generation, there should be a response from the top that steer the wheel, and without that steering, we're gonna hit the wall anyhow, as we are zooming past 1.5, but we're gonna hit the wall real fast. I think this is the key. What we see here, the contradiction between what we want and what's happening, is probably part of a way bigger question, which is the incorporation of environmental issues in what we do.
Well, you touched on it as well. It's like the sort of the visioning of someone like Anne Hidalgo, which is against the grain of some of the advisors and the criticisms, but there's a courage to taking those tough calls that you know you're going to get criticized for.
Yeah, I think what is actually interesting about those experience, the one we saw in Area C, because I was part of, I'm kind of friend of the guy, the equivalent of Vicente for Milan. At the time it was called Maran, Pier Francesco Maran, and I remember he was almost physically attacked in a meeting. Felt like somebody will go and slap him because he was introducing this Area C, which was incredibly contentious. But now it's in the background. Even the right-wing extreme don't bring it up as a subject of debate. Once you introduce those changes and if the courage, the vision, obviously the guts to do it, the consensus, like the one in Paris, you get the approval and that becomes obvious and nobody will fight against you. Yeah. But you have to have the guts to do it.
Yeah.
Obviously, if you're a politician, you're based on people voting you. So I understand how difficult it is. But, it's time now to take a bold decision.
Thank you. Okay, so let's see, we've got a couple of questions from the audience. I'm just trying to see underneath the light here. Any hands up in the room? Is it my vision, or is there no hands up? Oh, there's one on the left here, sorry.
For Nachwa, do you feel a change in the population since you've begun? Like you're saying, the government's carrying on with cars and interest in cars, but do you feel a movement growing as people see you on the streets more?
Yes. Yeah. The real number of cyclists is growing. Is growing from day to day. We are making really little baby steps, but we are improving. As I told you, we are targeting people to convince them to use the bike instead of the car. We are showing them the benefits of this use, and we are advising them to shift to a sustainable mobility system. By all of our actions, we are multiplying our number by educating them how to ride, because the most people in Tunisia, they don't know how to ride a bike. So we are making them learn how to ride it and how to go and how to ride safely to adopt this public transportation system in their daily basic lives, to go to work, to go to study, to go grocery shopping, to go have walks, but maybe, yeah.
Can I just add on to it looked from your photographs like there were a lot of women. Do you feel it's particularly interesting to women, or a new way for women to be mobile, or not necessarily?
We are integrating women, kids, adults, men, elderly people, no segregation between them.
Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it? I think in London, we've just tipped past that point where there are now more cyclists than drivers who are coming into central London on a daily basis. It's like it's been building for a while.
Well, the pandemic helped us do it.
Yeah, and the visibility of that is critical. And I think what we're now seeing in the UK is a backlash, a bit like what you were saying, your friend getting almost physically attacked. And then you get these crazy things coming from government saying they want to make cyclists have registration plates, and have to take a formal cycling exam. And the only country in the world that's ever done that, I think, is North Korea. So, which probably tells you everything you need to know. But any other final questions from the audience? Yes, down the middle here. We'll take one in the centre, and then other gentleman in the grey T-shirt.
I was wondering what kind of approaches to reaching out to the local government or the leadership have been effective in advocating for these changes in both of your cases. I'm from San Francisco, and I'll give an example that during the pandemic, in one of our main parks, it was closed to cars and turned to cycling. But now there's a ballot initiative that will decide whether it remains closed to cars or reopens. And the museums in the park are advocating to reopen it to cars. So I'll just leave you with that as an interesting kind of example, and curious about your experience navigating government in these initiatives.
Yeah, I mean, can I answer?
Yeah.
I think that there are two things. I work as I run a private firm, and we live on profit, let's say, but we try to. But the truth is that I think now I'm talking from my point of view. As a professional, it's no more time for a neutral position. I think also as a business opportunity, it's much more interesting to stay in the business, to try to transform it, to almost take a political stance. Bruce Mouse says you have the right to exist only if you contribute. So as a professional, we really try to fight. And we end up in meetings where you would like to, bang your head against the wall, because very often you get so much of a backward line of thinking, and when the young generation will come along, will sound such a thing from the past, like smoking on TV. But I think what I can say is that as a planner and as a transport planner, we have the power of envisaging a future, of transforming, and that's, I think, where our power resides, in having the ability to visualize, tell, and push for a different solution. It's also very clear, in my opinion, because I know that kind of feeling living in Milan, that especially now when you decide to take a vote, you are on a sort of, when you look at, as a politician, often which decision to take, you always, you do your surveys online and you try to understand what makes you get more people voting you. And I think, again, often, the presence of people that vote and drive the car are a very relevant voice. And I think that there is always some sort of fear to take bold decisions. So in that sense, I think you always have to think that you are in a city that has a certain mindset and certain voting power. And unfortunately, San Francisco might be one of the cases, where, it's the West Coast. Okay, you guys are going electric, but it's Tesla, it's Uber, it's Paris Max. It's not that kind of. I think a lot of problems. Sorry, I'm not sure it's not you. Are coming from these guys that have a lot of money, but very little vision of how to change things. So I think that is part of the tricky situation.
Well, in my case in Tunisia, decision makers are still not bold enough to take this green decision to make the city sustainable. So we still have to fight with the civil society to emphasize on what we want and to convince them to work hand in hand with us. So it's not that easy for us, because they are still keep ignoring that fact that we are facing the coolest days of climate change, and the days who are coming will be much hotter and will be unbearable to support. They're still looking for ways to modernize the city, and by looking for, as I told, by importing cars and helping people to buy new ones. But the ignorance that they have about the sustainable mobility, and that it's time to move toward a sustainable system, is very. It encourages us to push harder, to uphold again this affair, and to not give up to their mindsets.
Okay, thank you. So last question in the middle there.
Sure, and I think this one goes to Federico, and it probably is an odd one after Nachwa's presentation and these amazing images from bicycles in Tunisia, and kind of remind me of my time in Madrid and Massa Critica and Bici Critica, these critical masses that we had each month. But another part of my background is actually aviation. So I'm curious to have your take. Something that one of the previous speakers mentioned is I think that in 30 years' time, probably less private cars are going to be probably outlawed in many cities, and I think that's quite a probable outcome this day and age. But that doesn't necessarily prevent us from looking at ways of making them less harmful, decarbonizing private transport in cities today. So from that perspective, and again, this is something that you also alluded to was kind of our Eurocentrism, so our tendency to think that certain regulatory solutions are available everywhere, and probably that's not necessarily the case. So from that point of view, I'm curious to have your take on whatever shape, size aviation has in 20 years' time, 30 years' time. Hopefully it's not a time machine that we go back to flying as a luxury for a select elite. But suppose that we do have some kind of air transport connectivity. How would that integrate with new ways of city planning?
Okay, that's, the air transportation. First of all, I like, two things. One thing is that, because we were talking in San Francisco, if you listen to the interviews by Elon Musk, which is, missiles to Mars, which maybe will achieve incredible career. I read his biography. I was shocked. Clearly, when he steps in the meeting, he's always the smartest guy in the room. But when he talks about mobility, he tends to say the most preposterous things. It really irritates you. It just says exactly the opposite of what you would like to listen, which is always surprising. But when asked about flying objects, even Elon Musk said he doesn't see it coming, because just the way of the law of physics and the way, I don't know if that was the question, but, basically it's just not going to happen. Too much energy, too much noise. And again, we are going to move in such a little fraction of the society. In fact, one of the things that we should be thinking about is the CO2 budget that we generated out of this conference, because not only we shouldn't fly and we shouldn't think about flying, which I think should be used only for emergency-related topics. We should also try to think how we offset, or at least how we, a conference like this, for instance, should offer you the possibility of doing it online, I think, because not everybody can take the train. From Milan is 15 hours, 14 hours. So, no, I don't see it coming, and I think it's just a privileged niche of society that is figuring out a future for themselves, and which is one of the reasons why things are not going in the right direction. So I invite you to follow. There's a great Instagram, the jet of the rich or something like that takes account of the CO2 emissions.
Celebrity jets, yeah.
Sorry?
Celebrity jets, I think you're referring to.
Yeah, exactly. That takes account of the CO2 emissions. So, no, I find to close it off, I think that this narrative of, there's a great book by Peter Norton, I suggest, called Autonorama. I really loved it. That I think unveils in the best way the fictional and narration of going out of our problems through technology, which is kind of obvious, but the way it does it is so compelling that I think if you read it, you cannot not agree with it. I don't know if you already read it.
No, I haven't read that, but I always say technology is not an answer; it's a question.
Yeah.
And if you treat it like a question, then you treat it differently rather than into that solutions approach. Is like, how can it be useful to us?
Yeah, I think that in general, I think we are seduced by technologies, with the Hyperloop and, a lot of big tunnels, excavations are made out of the fact that you gain a fraction of time.
Personal drones
and stuff. But the truth is that I think we should get out of the mindset of speed altogether, which is embedded into our society. Obviously, I think goes well beyond transportation only. But there's a great work by a sociologist that I suggest called Hartmut Rosa, my hero, and I think he talks about that kind of shifting out. I think the work you're doing goes in that direction, in shifting out of this idea of going fast somewhere.
No, that's what Bayo Akumalafe always says. He goes, the times are urgent. Let's slow down.
Yeah.
Okay.